An officer was asking advice the other day in one of the correctional officer groups about, an inmate didn't like him, so he was paying another inmate to use a homemade knife to harm the officer. And he said he's had several problems with this issue, and he asked his supervisor to get the inmate out of the dorm. The agency, he says, is not going to press or not pushing hard enough to get criminal charges on the inmate. And, I understand we need to see what the situation is, but one thing that bothered me really bad is some people were putting, what did you do to make the inmates do this? What are you doing to make the inmates angry? Well, you know what, folks? My opinion only, and maybe I'm just too old school. First things first, no inmate should have a weapon. No inmate should be threatening an officer. No inmate should be paying another inmate to harm an officer with a homemade shank. That's my first thing I'm going to worry about. I want to investigate and charge these inmates with criminal charges. Now, during the investigation, if we want to see what prompted this to happen, we can do that. And then if a supervisor wants to coach the officer a little bit, that's fine. But don't blame the officer. I mean, I saw people blaming the officer right away. Well, these new young officers, these new young inmates, they're all a different breed. These new officers don't know how to handle the dorm. Folks, last time I checked the list of officers that have been injured by inmates, I've seen some veterans with 15, 20, 25 years that were attacked by inmates and injured. Any officer, anybody that works in the prison, at any given moment can be attacked by the inmate. I'm not going to verbally attack any officer who's been threatened by an inmate. I want to go in as a supervisor or as management, and I want to try to solve the problem. Number one, I definitely want to get an investigator assigned. If it's prison, let's get the prison inspector. If it's jail, let's get the jail detective. And, if you don't have an investigator that does these things, which some states don't have that in some counties, let's get a patrol unit down there and have a deputy investigate it. But we're going to do something to get a possible criminal charge on both those inmates, the one who wanted to pay the other inmate and the other inmate who was willing to do the dirty deed. Hey, at the minimum, do the investigation and send it to your local state attorney's office for review. Put it on the state attorney's shoulders and let the state attorney decide if there's enough for criminal charges or not. But if we don't do that, we're doing nothing to the inmates then. We're doing nothing to the inmates. What kind of logic is, what are you doing to make the inmates do this? Hey, inmates are not supposed to threaten us. Inmates are not supposed to put a hit out on us with a knife. What in the heck is going on, folks? The last time I heard we control the inmates, and blaming an officer who's been threatened by inmates is just, in my opinion, crazy. Even if you're a RoboCop, we've had topics on this before. RoboCops that sometimes go overboard in the dorm seem to get looked at by the inmates, and they lay low for the opportunity to get the officer. Okay, we can take care of the RoboCop issue with some counseling. But I'm not going to jump on an officer, whether they're RoboCop or they're fair, firm, and consistent, or they're weak. We have those type officers. At the moment, I'm going to try to find out why these inmates have a weapon hidden in that dorm, and I'm going to shake that dorm down. Why these inmates think they can take control and attack one of our officers or threaten one of our officers. And I want the inmates charged. Now we will then look at the officer. And if the officer needs some extra training, we can just do it nicely. Hey, we're going to give you some interpersonal skills training. We're going to talk to you about being firm, fair, and consistent, but don't be overboard and don't be too weak. The weak officers are the ones that get manipulated. The robo-cops, from what I've seen over the years, do get assaulted more. But does that mean that they should be? No. By no way am I going to attack any officer who has been threatened by an inmate. I'm going after that inmate first and counsel the officers later if and only if we determine that the officer did something wrong by being too overbearing, too weak, forgetting to do checks, not doing security checks, not doing contraband checks, whatever you find. But I'm not blaming the officer for what inmates do wrong. I just didn't like it. The guy was, I gave it away the guy, but the guy was kind of asking for advice from senior officers, and instead, some of them were like, what did you do wrong to make the inmates do that? By God, inmates aren't allowed to attack us. Inmates aren't allowed to have weapons. Let's look at that before we start jumping on an officer, okay? I'm going to end it right there. It just kind of got under my skin yesterday. If I'm wrong, tell me. Tell me that we're supposed to look at the officer first. My schools from the old days is we're going to take care of these inmates. And we're going to give them a disciplinary report. We're going to lock them up and we're going to investigate and we're going to seek outside criminal charges. Let me know if I'm wrong. Thank you. Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe.